I never imagined that I would be in a position where it would be so difficult to distinguish between friendship and treachery. By the time I was 32, my life was centered around my close-knit group of friends and my work as a graphic designer in Berlin. Sophie, my best friend from college, was one of them. Together, Sophie and I had experienced everything: breakups, job transfers, and innumerable nights out in the city. She was like a sister to me, and I loved her happiness very much. About 2 years prior, Sophie had wed Max, an attractive and driven architect. Their relationship appeared to be ideal from the outside. They were the type of couple who made other people jealous. Max was successful, focused, and quite attractive. Before that one night when everything changed, he and I had always gotten along well, and I had never considered him to be anything more than Sophie's husband. Sophie had asked me to their place for a little dinner party on a Friday night. After a demanding week, I was eager to relax and spend time with them over delicious food and wine. Max smiled amiably from the kitchen, where he was busy making appetizers, and Sophie gave me her customary warm embrace as I arrived. "Hi, Lena," Max yelled while brandishing a spatula. "I'm glad you were able to make it. Tonight, we're going to sample some new wines." I said, "I can't wait," taking off my shoes and settling into the warm living room. With its soft lighting, plants, and framed pictures of their trips together, their flat was always so welcoming. Setting the dinner and talking animatedly about her most recent job endeavor, Sophie was rushing around. A few minutes later, Max arrived with a bottle of wine and a platter of hors d'oeuvres. We laughed, reminisced, and enjoyed one another's company for the next hour. It seemed safe, familiar, and just like any other night. Sophie declared after supper that she had forgotten to get dessert from a neighboring bakery and that she had to rush out to get it. She grabbed her keys and coat and added, "It will only take me a few minutes. You all remain here and amuse one another. Need assistance?" She waved me away when I offered. "No need." Sophie blew a kiss and walked out the door, insisting, "Just relax, I'll be right back." Max and I were by ourselves in the dark flat as jazz hummed softly in the background. Max poured us each a glass while I sat back on the couch and savored the warm sensation from the wine. Max laughed and said, "She's always running around," as he handed me my drink. "That one never sits still. That's Sophie for you," I laughed and said. "She's like a tornado." We struck up a casual discussion, discussing our favorite films and the most recent rumors from our pals. I liked that Max tried to involve me in their lives, and he was easy to talk to, always had been. However, as the discussion progressed, I observed that Max's attitude started to shift. His praises were a bit too direct, and his eyes stayed on me longer than normal. He spoke softly and a little slurredly from the liquor. "You know, Lena, Sophie has always benefited much from your kindness. She is fortunate to have you as a friend." I said, "Thanks, Max," a little ashamed of the compliment. "To me, she is like family." With his gaze fixed on mine, he went on, "She talks about you all the time. It's always about how wonderful you are. And I understand why." I was a little uneasy because I didn't know where the talk was going. "Sophie is fantastic. She is indeed a blessing in my life." Max nodded, his face contemplative. "You too are fortunate. Her love for you is evident. But, Lena, I see you too. I can tell how much you care and how much you do for her. And I simply want you to know that you are amazing." I tried to deflect by laughing awkwardly. "All right, enough compliments. I will blush because of you." I felt my heart race as he grinned, yet there was a glimmer of something more in his eyes. "But it's true," he emphasized, bending slightly closer. "You are a unique individual." I could feel the tension rising between us, an unsaid undercurrent that made my stomach turn, and the air between us became heavy. This was Max, the spouse of my closest buddy, who was meant to be totally off-limits. However, it was hard to ignore the way he was staring at me and the way his voice grew softer as he spoke. "Max, we ought to just—" I started, but he cut me off with a solemn, deep voice. His eyes were fierce as he said, "I know this is crazy, but I'm powerless to stop it. Lena, I've had this feeling for a long time. Additionally, I've lost the ability to pretend. Stunned, I gazed at him. I had never sought this and I had not anticipated it. I shook my voice as I reminded Max that he was married to Sophie. My best friend is her. I understand, he said, his face displaying ambivalence. I also adore her. However, that doesn't alter my feelings for you. I was at a loss for words as his revelation hung in the air like a weight. His remarks caused a wave of feelings that I couldn't ignore, even though I knew this was wrong, and a betrayal of everything I held dear. It was completely incorrect, overpowering, and perplexing. I firmly responded, Max, we can't do this, getting to my feet and putting some distance between us. Sophie isn't treated fairly by this. None of us are treated fairly. He got to his feet as well, raising his hands in a sign of submission. You're correct. I apologize, Lena. I didn't intend to cause awkwardness. I had to say it. Still in shock over his admission, I nodded. With a shaky voice, I proposed, let's just forget this happened. We can act as if this never happened because Sophie will return any moment. Max paused, then gave a nod. Indeed. You're correct. I apologize. The weight of what had just happened settled over us like a dense cloud as we stood there in awkward stillness. All I wanted to do was stand there and confront the truth of what had just happened. I wanted to scream, to run. However, the door opened before I could collect my thoughts, and Sophie entered with a cheerful smile and a box of sweets. She joyfully said, "Got the goods," despite the tension in the room. I hope that without me, you two didn't have too much fun. In the hopes that she wouldn't see the discomfort in my face, I forced a grin. I took the package from her and placed it on the table, saying softly, "Just chatting." What was the bakery like? I listened as Sophie began to tell me about her experience at the bakery, trying to keep my head straight as my thoughts were racing about what had just transpired. I hoped Sophie wouldn't notice how awkward we were sitting together as Max sipped his wine and avoided making eye contact. I made an effort to ignore the incident as the evening wore on, instead concentrating on Sophie and her contagious enthusiasm. However, the fact was that Max's words and the way he had gazed at me kept coming back to me. I knew I had to figure out a way to make things right because it was a betrayal on so many levels. My chest ached from the shame I felt as I gave Sophie a tight hug when it was time for me to go. I couldn't take the idea of hurting her because she was my best friend and the one who had always supported me. As I said farewell, I gave Max a quick, uneasy nod, and he gave me a quiet, "Be careful, Lena." The walk home seemed to go by quickly, with my mind racing with a jumble of guilt, uncertainty, and annoyance. I repeatedly relived the event in my head, wondering how I got into this unfeasible predicament and how things had gone so badly. I was aware that I needed to speak with Max and make it plain that we could never be together again, but I wasn't sure how to do it without making matters worse. Max sent me a text the following day. "Can we talk, please? I really apologize for last night. I must make everything plain." My heart was racing as I gazed at the message. I was afraid about how the conversation would proceed, but I knew that I couldn't ignore it and that we needed to talk about what had happened. I hesitated for a second before typing back my answer. "All right. In an hour, meet me in the park." Max was seated on a bench in the park, looking at the ground, when I got there. When he noticed me, he looked up, his face displaying a mixture of resolve and sorrow. I sat down next to him, and he started, "Lena, I'm really sorry. Those were inappropriate things for me to say. I apologize if I upset you, but I was out of line." I took a big breath and nodded. "Max, you did make me uneasy. More than that, though, you put me in a really challenging situation. There is nothing I can do to harm Sophie, who is my best friend." "I understand," he muttered. "And I didn't intend to place you there. Lately, I've been feeling really lost. I suppose I just projected my feelings onto you because things haven't been going well with Sophie. It was unfair, and I apologize." His remarks hurt, and I became enraged. "Max, you can't only rely on me to solve your issues. To work things out with Sophie, you need to speak with her. I'm not the solution." He looked truly sorry as he nodded. "You're correct. You are, I'm sure. I swear I will speak with her." I simply didn't want to make matters worse than they already were. The weight of our discourse hung between us as we sat in quiet for a while. Max's heartfelt apologies didn't make the hurt and bewilderment go away, even though I knew it was sincere. Even though I valued him as a friend, I couldn't allow his behavior to endanger my bond with Sophie. Ultimately, I stated in a firm voice, let's just agree to move on from this. All we can do is be friends. Additionally, you must tell Sophie the truth about your relationship. Max nodded, a forlorn look on his face. Yes, I will. I also swear to respect your personal space. I apologize, Lena, for everything. I smiled at him, a little tight, with a mixture of relief and regret. It's all right. Take care of Sophie, please. She is deserving of that. I experienced both a feeling of closure and a lingering grief as we said our goodbyes. I was aware that Max and I would never be the same again and that there would always be an unsaid tension between us. But I was prepared to do whatever it took to maintain my friendship with Sophie. I spent the following few weeks trying to put my life back together and find solace in the rituals that used to comfort me. I made an effort to reaffirm the limits that had been so delicately tested, and I avoided Max, only seeing him when Sophie was there. Sophie, on the other hand, was blissfully oblivious to the chaos that had almost ripped us apart. I took comfort in her steadfast companionship, and she remained her intelligent, vivacious self. It served as a reminder that loyalty and honesty are worth fighting for, and that some ties are stronger than the temptations that try to sever them. The recollections of that night faded as time passed, and I started to feel more relaxed. Max and I descended into a comfortable distance, our exchanges courteous and friendly, but devoid of the intimacy we had previously experienced. Although it wasn't ideal, the resolution was sufficient. And I realized that I had gained valuable insight as I looked to the future. Believe there is a purpose behind the boundaries we set in our relationships, and that stepping over them can have repercussions that go well beyond our original intentions. But with time, patience, and a commitment to doing what's right, even the most complicated situations can find their way back to solid ground. And that was enough for me.